Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've been enjoying the Cosmonarchy daily videos because this is yet another one. We've got Eud64 taking on Krankendau. Finally, some Terran on Zerg action. I've been waiting for this moment. Now, this game was played on the previous release for the the May Royal Invitational, so that was the last tournament that was played. That was the same balance update, so we don't have some of like the revisions to Reclamation that came later and stuff like that. I don't know if that'll end up showing up in this particular cast. Let's find out. We're going to start off on Blackwater Bastion, a map by Bitty B, and we have vertical spawns here with Krankendau in the bottom left, Eud in the top left. I am very much looking forward to seeing how this kind of matchup evolves. I've actually been writing a longer than usual, or like I guess more topic-oriented than usual episode or installment of the Cosmonarchy's Compass, which is our weekly devlog. And that devlog is kind of slated to, because it's a bit of a slow development week in that I don't really have a lot of fancy stuff to show off. I wanted to just write some musings about how the matchups are evolving over time. And it's great that I'll be able to see some TVZ, because that is actually, I mean, technically TVT is the matchup that we have the least amount of data on right now, but I would say that TVZ is a pretty small number as well, because a lot of the times the Terrans that are on, like Eud, who is our best Terran right now, those guys are usually not necessarily on at a time where they can play a lot of versus Zerg, and Krankendau is our best Zerg right now, I would say, since, you know, maybe the Shambler would be able to give him a run for his money, but he's kind of like not sure what race he even wants to play as right now. I still think Hamster could be a pretty damn good Zerg, but he's way out of practice now. He pivoted to Protoss, now he's trying Terran, he wants to play Bio all the time. That stuff is great, man. I love it, but we're going to have to wait and see what ends up happening here. And while we've been blabbing, of course, the game has been going on. We've got a Fulcrum start here for Eud, so he's not interested in going for Bio, at least not as the opening. And we do have a Larvosk into Pool for Krankendau, so this is a build that he actually proliferated, he popularized, he came up with. And yeah, he's been coming up with all sorts of wild things. I look forward to seeing some of them in action. Maybe we'll even see some interesting ones in this set. But at least for now, this is going to give him a little bit of more efficiency at the cost of build space and map control. On a map like Blackwater Bastion, where the ramp is so far away, that actually does have a bit of a... let's just say there's something that you do end up losing there, I think. So because Eud sent out his Worker Scout pretty fast, he did see that his opponent's Worker Scout was coming in from the bottom, and so he will be able to rally his first Vulture out. It's going to be a Vulture into Quarry, which is a very bog-standard Terran build as far as an opener is concerned. You can see if he can put a little bit of damage down onto some of those units. And 2 pairs of Quasis are started. I think the Vulture will get there just in time to see them hatch. So Krankendau should be just fine, but there could be some wild micro shenanigans that occur. We'll see if anything like that ends up happening. Yeah, okay, so Krankendau is going to have his Quasis out before the Vulture can get up the ramp. The only question really is whether or not he can put anything else down. He's going to end up losing that mine as it goes down, unfortunately. So he's going to have to fall on back. And now that the cliff advantage is secured for Krankendau, he should be just fine for the foreseeable future. He's got more Vultures rallying into him, so he does have to watch out for that. Laying the mines makes sense. But Krank just wants to hold this and to eventually take his expansion, right? He's not necessarily interested in pushing out with just quasi units of all things. The Quasilisk is fairly slow compared to like the Zeth or some of the other options that you can get. So you do need to benefit from that cliff advantage, I think, versus I would say an adept Microman. We'll see if Eud can show some of that off a little bit. Instead, he's just going to go ahead and try to place more mines. The idea here is that he's going to fully, continue to extend forward, and then if there is ever a counter-engage, that would be something that Krankendau would pay dearly for, because these mines actually stun your units, and so he might actually be offered up an option. Oh, okay, so he killed it, so it just slowed, but then there was a big, meaty stun that locked out 5 of his units, and this is going to allow the Vultures to overwhelm, sort of descend upon them and pick them to pieces. Very thematic usage of the Vulture. And now Krankendau is kind of caught a little bit off-center, a little bit worse for wear, as he's going to attempt to deal with this threat somehow. There is still one more mine ready. In fact, that's the one that ends up falling back just to make sure it doesn't get sniped, because it can still be useful here, and another big connection for those mines. This is actually a really scary situation for Krankendau to be in. He will pop a single Vulture. He's putting good damage on the rest. We don't have the opportunity to lay another mine, though, and in fact, on the way out, the body block does end up getting to him. And again, this is not an all-in position here for Eud, right? He's still got some money in the bank. He's scaled up his economy. He's been producing non-stop workers out of the quarry, which is additional worker queue. So that has afforded him the ability to, get his ministry up. Ministry expand is like something you want to be able to do. as Terran, I think. And the reason why you want to be able to do it is because it gives you that extra worker production, so you can build even more workers and saturate even faster and scale up to, you know, tier 2 faster or whatever it is you're trying to get to much faster than before. And that's something that I think is worth its weight in gold a lot of the time. We'll see if that ends up being the case. Also, as a pro tip, in Cosmonarchy, the mines themselves don't block building placement, so you actually want to place them, like, near here or something. I mean, versus Zerg, it doesn't matter because you're going to stun the... I don't know what that Goliath was doing there, but you got a little ambitious. Oh my god. We've got yet another set of matches here. I can't believe this, dude. Honestly, the fact that the connections have been so good, Krankendau definitely... Krankendau has been suffering from the mine success. And I like this little anti-drop mine. I feel like it's very unlikely you fly directly over here, right? So if there's going to be some kind of drop, which would definitely hurt Eud right now, that is something that he is prepared for. Going to go ahead and start preemptively transferring so many workers. He still has a lot on minerals, so that's how many workers he was able to make at a time, instantly going for the extra quarry. So he's going to be pumping out 4 workers per rotation. Exploratory quaz. Oh, nice. It actually relocates the mine to a more useful position, so never mind, it wasn't nice. I was going to say, oh, that's good for Crank. He's going to end up sacrificing a quaz to get rid of one of those mines, but it was not to be. Some Zorius being made now. So the Zorka Shroud gives you 3 other units that you can make out of the larva, including the Zorius which, when it takes damage, gives you some pretty significant benefits because it'll spawn a Rillarok core, which is sort of like a broodling, except it has lifesteal and stuff like that. So it's supposed to be like a thing that the more damage it takes, you know, the more often it takes damage, I guess, the more value you're going to get out of it. And so it can kind of like reinforce in a small way. All right, the Ovaleth is here to detect these mines, and he sees, hey, there's nothing over here. So I guess I'll just go ahead and clear this. And yeah, indeed, Eud had fallen back. Because he didn't really have extra production this whole time, this was like a paper tiger type of contain. As soon as it gets to the point where it's threatening to fall away, threatening to be destroyed, you do need to watch out for that. So a frontal fulcrum to sort of block incoming damage, incoming units, frustrate the paths and such. And then, of course, an anchor in the back, so you can put some of the Cyclops in there or something. Vestry coming out of the stockade. Ovaleth will poke its head in, but immediately takes some shellacking. Watchdog off to the side as additional anti-drop maneuvers. And you can see Krankendau very quick to explore the rest of the map, take his 3rd base finally. Honestly, it's still pretty good timing. I mean, the worker count is obviously favoring Eud, but Krankendau is able to get back into the game worker count-wise. In fact, I think I just saw him send out, yeah, he's going to take 6 o'clock for a 4th base. So you can tell he's definitely thinking, yeah, I want more treasury coming, so that'll be the expansion of choice for Eud. We'll see where he wants to go with that, because vertical spawns, taking this base can be tricky. Poor Zeth. Playing dodgeball, high stakes, reenacting 1917 over here. All right, so the Zeths are charging forward just underneath the ant seal, seeing what's going on. The scouting will commence, and Eud will be able to get some pretty good power. Okay, so we can kind of see what's happening here. Eud telegraphing what he wants to do. He's going to go ahead and try to take this base as like the conventional 3rd, which does make some sense. It's just like it can be tricky to hold in vertical spawns, especially versus Zerg that naturally want to surround you anyway. So, you know, if you give them this angle, and maybe even a drop angle, then you're starting to run into some territory where maybe you'd rather not be against the swarm. But yeah, as we get a little bit deeper into the game, I'm very much looking forward to what Krankendau's army composition is going to be. He's added the Hydrith. He's adding some sprays. Yeah, anti-drop. Makes sense. Tier 2 just started in the top left. So Eud definitely going for some extra tech. Quarry being added here. Anchor deployed. Numero dos. These just have vultures in them right now. Not the most threatening unit to put into the anchor. That little beeping was the fulcrum lifting off. So I guess it's going to go ahead and land here just to continue to frustrate the path. You don't really want to put an add-on out here, though, because I feel like it's super easy to snipe. But that's okay. It can still produce vultures and Cyclops and Goliath, so not the end of the world. Adding even more fulcrums. So he still wants to commit to the tier 1.5 mech. Tier 1.5 mech. Adding another one, man. So he's got a lot of fulcrums, right? But I don't know what his tier 2 choice is going to be then, because, you know, tier 2 you could add mantles, you could add captaincies, and maybe, I think people often do add captaincies for like madcaps and now apostles and stuff like that. And then I'm trying to think about, uh-oh, that Oboleth is dead. See ya. So, yeah, I'm trying to think about like what people would normally add for this. I guess I've seen Eud go for starports before. He'll go for like 2 starport into, you know, 1 commandment, 1 rotary, which is the 2 different add-ons you can get from it. In fact, I would imagine a starport would be really nice here. You can see him doing that. There's some mantles. Okay, he's actually not going captaincy this game. At least not yet. Iris did get started, meanwhile, for Krankendau. So he's, as the Terran Tier 2 tech is finished, the Zerg Tier 2 tech is being deployed. So absolutely the case that Crank could have maybe done that a little bit sooner. But now he's saturating his 4th base. Maybe he's thinking about additional ones. He's got very nice map control. He's got Zeth sort of moving all around, seeing what's up. This Fulcrum ended up getting lifted off at some point. I'm not really sure why. It's like Eud wants to do something with it. Maybe he wants to be able to move out of his base easy, and so that's why he's lifted it off preemptively. But, you know, Crank is just sort of, it's a no man's land kind of situation as both of our players trying to tech up. Obviously, Eud will have a bit of an advantage in that in terms of the tempo. Terran tech is a little bit less expensive in gas, a little bit more expensive in minerals. So when you see that, that's the case. But look, you know, we already have the Iris complete. What are we going to see Krankendau use for this? He's going to go ahead and throw down Spire? Yep, okay. And Tethvith as well. I would love to see the Calculator Lake, but I also think that with all of the phalanxes, the splash damage versus something like a Lyralisk Flood would be really absurd. It's just he doesn't even have the ability to make Vorvs without evolving the pool at least once. So that's a little bit unfortunate. But anyway, one of the things that I am thinking that Crank will definitely be going for is some air here. I suspect he'll be going for some mutas to try to overwhelm the Air Force. The only question is, you know, do you have enough to deal with the Cyclops, right? Because the Cyclops are going to be able to deal plenty of good splash damage, but there's only 4 of them right now, it looks like, 5. And yeah, Eud definitely making himself known. There's a big stack of Lakizilisks out here. Huge amount of units sort of scattered around the map just to see what's going on. And yeah, I feel like looking the way that we look as of right now, it would be excellent to see what some of the engagements are going to look like here. We have some cataphracts. They're sort of like, they're like the upgraded Goliath in a way, I guess you could think of them as. They shoot up to 4 targets at once, and it's just like steady shot, very good, consistent DPS. And they're also pretty tanky, so there's that too. All right, we're back. Just had a brief interruption there. So, yeah, as I was mentioning, though, the sharking of the armies back and forth, we're clearly setting up for a massive move. All of the Zerg units are essentially out on the map. We got some mutating over here as well, trying to make some Tetzoricors. I did hear a Goliath die. I don't know if that was a misclick, because Eud was moving forward and A-clicking. That does happen sometimes. We've got the Bastons moving on down to return to the neutral ministry. I don't know if that's something that Eud counted on, but it is giving him some nice vision of the incoming attack, some good mine connections. We got the Seraph out to rend the armor. That's going to be very, very massive. Keep your eyes on the front line, though, because all of those phalanxes are already going down. The overwhelm coming out with the Zoryus being able to speed up all of the Zerg as they descend upon the Terran lines. Here come the Lakizilisks being sped up as well. Remember that the detection from the Seraph is still there. Great irradiate fields, keeping that sustained attack. Reinforcements coming in can still be very deadly, even though Terran has lost a lot of what they have. Zerg has been traded down as well, and there are 18 Protathalors in production. That is a very one-note kind of composition for Krankendau. So as the action starts to fall off, and the Terran army has seemingly been wiped, you got to remember that as of right now, Eud, oh, he says he's got empty anchors. He unloaded everything on his way out. The treasury now going to get attacked. He needs to see if he can repair that. Instead, it's just going to end up being focused down. The repairs come in way too late. And here come the Protathalor reinforcements. Some of the Lakizilisks were still able to stay alive, and those Seraph irradiates can be huge for that. You can see here the Protathalors rallying forward, trying to snipe out the phalanxes. Need a D-Matrix from the Azazel as soon as Eud remembers it. And there we go. He is going to have to replenish that treasury there. His 12 o'clock is up. He can maybe transfer some workers in that neck of the woods as well. It seems like he's held for now, but this is going to be even more power for Krankendau. Drops his hatch there. Don't mind that it's off-center. Oh, man. So Yeah, I don't know. I really like the engagement there. It was a great, beautiful spread with all of the attack forces coming in at basically the same time and from the same angles. Very hype. Some sentinels are going to be established over here to ward off any would-be run-bys. Not that many Zets out on the field, actually, so I don't know how many run-bys you can really have. A couple of Kizilisks still loitering around the premises. Maybe just one. Man, the Tetzoricors... I didn't really see them get into the last fight, but they are so tanky, and they also have lifesteal, so that's where a lot of their tankiness actually comes from, funnily enough. Now, it looks like Eud has arrived at just the perfect time. Nice mine connection yet again. That's been like an MVP for Eud, just putting down mines wherever he can, and his Reclamation is out now, so he's going to start to turn the Iziricors against his opponent. Great Irradiate Field as well to reduce the Protathalor count. And so he keeps some of those Zerg units for himself, reanimating the corpses. They're going to be much slower than before, but they will be able to endure nonetheless. Now, those Protathalors are essentially great targets for trying to pinpoint focus the Apostle, which is what was doing that Reclamation. And the Apostle is very expensive as well, so this is the only one that Eud currently has on the field. Doesn't look like he's made any others. So, you know, that's a lot of eggs in one basket, I feel like. Not to mention the fact that the Zerg units that are reclaimed are going to be less mobile and less capable of actually maneuvering, and maybe even sort of drop his ability to maneuver in the battle. They're definitely more useful in the battle than they are outside of the battle, I would say. All right, so Krankendau transferring a huge boatload of workers down to the bottom right natural. That is his 5th base. I have noticed that Krankendau will often be put into situations where he builds out this situation with all of the 4 bases, the fast 4 base, but then it takes him a while to actually establish a next base. So I don't know if that's something that, you know, he's just all hands on deck producing so many units, and that's why his money goes down so low. This the Kisilisk staring down the barrel of a bunch of vultures. Got to watch out for that. More minefields can be laid, and probably shall be. Some nice static defense coming up at 6 o'clock, and a little bit down here at the natural as well, mostly anti-drop. Because at this point, if Eud goes down the barrel at any point, it's absolutely something that he'll have to watch out for. The Protathalor count, if he can steal more Protathalors, that is definitely going to help him out, though. Those little artillery strain Zerg units can be very efficient at long ranges, something that does favor that's what the Terran Arsenal is favoring right now. So we've got Antseals, we've got Azazels, we've got Seraphs, so there's plenty of spellcasting and detection and protection. Now here we go. Looks like, oh, never mind, Krankendau was... He was a little bit overly ambitious to jump forward. It looks like no, and he is going to go for it now. The Apostle targeting on the right side means that this left flank is vulnerable, but it doesn't really feel like there's really any breaking this position. And no, yeah, just from that alone, it felt like Krankendau, he had so much gas in the bank. I guarantee you he was saving up for that tier 3 and then maybe let it slip a little bit later on. Because that last engagement, you could tell Krankendau was out of units. And yeah, it's a little... interesting that Eud was able to make that happen and stay alive. It did feel like he spiked back up and remaxed maybe faster than Krankendau was predicting. But in any event, that is the first game going Eud's way. We got a couple more here, so let's see what happens in game number 2. All right, we are back on Paradise this time around. Another map by Biddy B, a port of Dante's Peak. Some people just call it Fighting Spirit 2.0 or something. But Eud is in the bottom right and Krankendau is in the top left. And I am taking a sip while you think about coffee, the drink and the link. So as we get a little bit deeper into this set between these two fellas, I want to say that shout out to Krankendau for going through all of the replays that people submit and telling me which ones are really looking good for a cast. This set, I wonder about. I'm not sure. He said that like the range, the game quality ranged pretty widely or something. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what we end up finding within this. But it's always interesting. It's always interesting to see what kinds of things happen. And it's nice and relieving to know that when I boot up a replay, I have the right version because a man has checked that version and then watched the replay. And that's just nice. It's nice to know. I don't have to second guess myself like, wait, which version is this? Because, of course, Cosmonarchy has so many updates that it's nice to know which version the replay was actually played on. You can get the most accurate output then. Eud will be going ahead and scouting top spawn. Droleth going to the bottom left for Krankendau, who is going for the Larvosk into pool opener. And that means that this cross-spawn game will open kind of similarly, although Eud is going for Stockade into Quarry instead of Fulcrum into Quarry. So the bio will come out here. A little bit of a nice, neat little experiment. 3 Vespene remaining. All right, Krankendau is confirming that nobody is in the bottom left. Is he going to box scout? Yes, he is. He's actually double scouting here, so when he encounters the Mason, that might be a giveaway. But yeah, it looks like our opponents, our players, our competitors are going to find each other second with their second scout. Very nice. One thing that I am very much looking forward to is, I already mentioned it in the previous the previous video, but the team game's coming out. I actually started another 2v2 map draft so that we can get more content out for stuff like that, so you get more options for people to play. And unfortunately, this worker is going to get roasted, but he'll see that it's bio, and so he'll probably expect that it's like a fast quarry again, as Eud does like to do that. He has mixed in some all-ins here and there. We saw him do that versus Jackie Langsky in the tournament, the May Royal Invitational. So he's able to do those kinds of all-in moves, but it's helpful to know what you're up against, and generally it's kind of low percentage to have something like that occur in a 4-spawn map. So getting a pretty good scout on all the quasis, and again on this BDB tile that I keep selecting. I'm sure it'll be updated at some point, right? And then, yeah, the main thing I would say about the composition here is that these quasis can try to threaten, but the cliff advantage on the Cyprians is definitely going to keep them at an arm's length. And we're going to see what Eud decides to do from this point forward. He's going to have a lot of mineral float since he's building Cyprians, which take longer and take a lot of Vespene. So going straight for a Vestry follow-up means... oh, and another Stockade. Okay, so I'm curious as to what his bio build is, and if you're Hamster or anybody else who's trying to make bio Terran work, you might want to watch this guy, because it does work very nicely versus Zerg, and maybe it can even help versus Protoss in certain situations. But we're going to see what Krankendau can do on the offense, since he does have a little bit of tempo. Something you give up when you're going for the Vultures in the early stages of the game is a little bit of scaling into the mid-stage. You saw how long Eud in the last game was on a single Fulcrum, and he could get away with that, but... you know, maybe if Crank was wise to that play, he could have just run by a couple of units or try to escape the contain before it really got established and stuff like that. So worker transfer is en route, and we have a Covenant coming up for the advanced specialist units coming up for Eud, as well as, of course, Hurricanes. So it's Eidolon. Okay, Eidolon, or early Eidolons. Those can be pretty tricky to play against. I think there's not really an accepted paradigm of what to do versus Eidolons of all units, but generally speaking, I would imagine it would look something like Zorius or just Mass Zeth Vorv. One of those two can definitely help. But you probably want Zorkiz anyway, the structure. You probably want the Shroud, because it's going to give you the crowd control necessary to fight the bio. You could also go Iziracore. I feel like they're pretty cost-efficient now that they're cheaper and also a little bit tankier. But... I feel like Hydras and Skithercores and... well, okay, Hydras don't scale super well versus bio, but Bactylisks do. So if you were to evolve your Den into the Scab, that would give you access to stuff that would help you siege positions, and maybe also counter-snipe things like the Eidolons. But it becomes a bit more of a positional game. I guess you're a bit more mobile with that composition instead of the Lakizilisks, which are more on the side of... oh, look at this. If he's paying attention, he'll see that, and he'll know that there's a cloaked unit somewhere, but I don't think he did. So, okay. I was going to say Eud might have realized that, oh, something was decloaking my stuff. But yeah, at this point, Crank has figured out when the move out is happening. He's going to go ahead and put down some circuits. You got to watch out, though, because the Eidolons can outrange them. And obviously, they're also going to be cloaked if you don't have some kind of detection anyway, unless you're on top of them. Proximity cloak definitely helps out. But the Hurricanes are already here, right? And so these need to hurry up and mutate. What are the compositions going to look like? Zorkiz just finishes. I think he needs to hurry up and queue up some Lakiz, because otherwise I feel like this is just going to overwhelm him. But we'll see how long Eud takes. He's going to go ahead and start whittling down the circuit hits. You can dodge forward, and yeah, you can see that proximity will decloak the Eidolon. But then you take some pot shots backwards. So actually, I think Eud He's giving a little bit too much respect. I honestly think he could have just charged forward there and really put Krankendau in a tough spot because most of the circuits weren't actually finished. And you can see the just 2 Eidolons does deal some pretty good damage to the structures. So Krank is going to go ahead and move back and forth, but he does have the Lechizalisks coming out now, so I think he'll be just fine. He'll have a total of 3 of them in a moment here with 2 of them already out. Just needs to get them actually onto the field. There we go. So, okay, now here comes the charge forward, and now that the Lechizalisks are here, that kind of cancels the ability to push them forward. Oh, he's falling on back, though. And we don't have a star pad just yet, so now that that's been revealed, okay, star pad coming up, the expansion is up and running. We've got pretty even worker counts at this stage in the game. Like, obviously Zerg is down, but in an absolute sense, but this is a fine situation for the Zerg to be in. He just doesn't want to get contained again. That was the recipe for Eud's success in the previous match, so Krankendau doesn't want to allow that to repeat. And unfortunately for him, his Lechizalisks are going to get focused down by those snipers. The Eidolon definitely cracking shot after shot off. Now we got some Zorius out to try to speed things up. There's a meaty couple of Hurakan hits. Clark's keeping everybody patched up. You hear the stim pack evacuate, so that's that little sound there at the end is when the effect wears off. And he's just sort of poking around and seeing what he can do. All right, so more Lechizalisks is the answer right now for Krank. He's got some anti-drop defenses set up, since he's aware that the star pad is likely coming, and indeed it is. Oh, okay, I like this, going for Gorgor Cores. So Gorgor Cores are very good versus clumped up units like this. And also air units in general are kind of good at trying to deal with the Eidolons. It's okay to take some damage over here, on the Lechizalisks in particular, because they burrow twice, they regenerate twice as fast while burrowed. All Zerg units do that. But you can see how good how punishing this can be when you have like the hit squad going and you can 2-tap the Lechizalisks on an individual basis. So we only have 2 Gorgs. It's not the craziest number, but if he can like come up from the bottom or from the top and surprise the Eidolons while they're in a fixed position, that can definitely do the difference. Now, at this point, Krankendau has revealed his position, right? He's revealed that the Gorgs are out. Let's see how long they last. One of them getting focused down immediately. And sure, you've decloaked the Eidolons and forced them backwards, but is that going to actually be enough? He can start to break the front. Detection is here, so you'd no longer get a get out of jail free card from the Lechizalisks. That is a very nice swing as the Anseal rallies on up. 5 more Lechizalisks coming. I feel like if the Gorgs had come in from a surprise angle, that might have been able to help out a little bit more. Because the Mavericks when the Mavericks are all stimmed up, the Eidolons, they're not the main source of damage anymore, right? You're fighting away from your defenses, and of course away from your Lechizalisks. They couldn't even really burrow in time to get anything done before the Anseal showed up. We got a second one coming. After a certain point, the Anseals become much more powerful. Actually, a third, excuse me. They become a lot more powerful at dealing with some of this stuff. Oh no! Taking a step forward, though. Drawn on in, lured. But yeah, now the detection is here. You can't even keep your Lechizalisks burrowed. That means they're not going to regenerate as fast, and also means that they can't really attack or anything. So, third base almost complete here for Eud. He's making the most of this contain, and still very threatening. Showing us what bio can be like with the Eidolons. This is a style that Hamster has tried to play too, so it's very interesting to see that. But there's so many Lechizalisks now, and you can see if you're clumped up, they can and will burst you down. It doesn't matter if you can see them or not. The Anseal's not in a good position to detect. We got a single Savant out here trying his best to use the penetrating shot. Maverick's going to go ahead and try to stim up. I feel like he's pretty close to killing off all the Zerg units, but I think at this point, yeah, the Zorius is definitely... they're a little bit too potent at this point. And when the damage gets too low, you just end up spawning more units for you to try to shoot down and deal with. And so that is going to be all she wrote. The clerics are not going to get out alive, I don't think. Yeah, especially if they stop to heal each other like that. Maybe he can try to deal with the Zorius finally now. Looks like it will end up going down. Okay, so the one Zeth over here as well. Just kidding. This one still is watching for the scout. It's amazing that that's lasted so long. All right, the Atlas is about a quarter of the way through, so we are getting towards Tier 2. Remember, Krankendau hasn't been able to expand to a third base yet. This one only now starting to bear fruit for Eud, but he's transferring some workers down there. And there's a lot of Lechizalisks still alive. Like, again, sure, you have the detection from the Anseal, now finally getting rid of that pesky scout there that's been spying on you, reporting back the whole time. I'm actually not sure where the Anseals went. Okay, they're up here on this side. Interesting, interesting. Okay, we've got another engagement coming up here. Lechizalisks sticking it out. All right, we are back. Of course, I had another interruption. Don't worry, I'm sure that was the last one of the day. So, the third for Eud is indeed up and running, and he is starting to establish those anchors. This is before Paradise was updated to have a little bit of cover over here to make this a bit easier to hold. Krankendau can absolutely do some damage in this position. It's just a question of how good his engagement is. He's got a very big spread of 7 Lakizilisks, and he's going to go ahead and try to relocate them. Remember, the Eidolon count was managed quite heavily by that last attack, so it definitely is favored to the Zerg right now. You can't really get a good engagement off the way that Eud is clumping up his forces. It's a much more mech style of, general unit pathing. And he's actually going to end up losing a couple of those extremities as the engagement starts to take shape. Mind you, back at home, Krankendau is a little bit more focused on his military right now, but he does have a good number of workers to transfer over to the third. That will reduce the amount of disparity for the economics, and he's going to charge forward with 9 Lakizilisks now. That is it's a scary number no matter what, as long as it's more than 2. And the Shaman deployed here is going to need to fall away. You can see the leapfrog occurring with more of them coming on in. Trying to do his best to charge forward. These Lakizilisks just absolutely making mincemeat of the Terran army. Krankendau looking okay from this position. The Ant Seal's all over the place for detection. It means that these Lakizilisks will have limited efficiency, but at this current moment, it feels like Eud is still trading a little bit too audaciously here. But remember, he has a saturated third. This whole time, Krankendau hasn't been able to look back at his main. He's going to go ahead and try to do that now, queue up some more units, and of course try to set up more workers at that position. He had 2 Lakizilisks back at home as well. Probably weren't going to make the difference. But yeah, as of right now, I think Eud is fine. He might even be, you could say, nominally ahead, since he is going to tech over to the Guild Hall, adding more captaincies to the mix. He's going to start working in autocrats to his army, I believe. I'd love to see some Olympians as well, but the autocrats have that penetrating shot, and they also, of course, reclaim. So it does feel like it's a pretty potent option here. Now, the Zets are going to continue to scout forward. The Tier 2 is nowhere to be found right now. So that's a worrying sign for Krankendau, because last game, he made his Tier 2 as the Tier 2 for Eud finished. This game, he doesn't have Tier 2 out. He doesn't have a 4th base up. He really doesn't have a lot going for him. It felt like if he didn't win that engagement with the Lakizilisks really dominantly and wipe out the third, then he would be in an awkward position to go forward. So yeah, I would definitely say that looking at it again, Eud is ahead. I thought for some reason that he had Tier 2, and that's why I was like, oh, maybe Krankendau is fine. But no, he's in a very worrying spot right now. The only question is whether or not Eud takes his time on the attack. He doesn't have any information. He doesn't know how far ahead he is, how positioned he is to win victoriously. But I do think that he can still suffer some crippling blows in this transitionary period. He does have an autocrat out, so that's going to be a high priority target. One thing that's kind of interesting over here with all these Lakizilisks is there's 14 of them. He could just walk in, right-click into the main, or into the third base and kill it. And if he shuts down that, maybe he stands a good chance at delaying stuff. Hydra's then on the way, but no Tier 2 just yet. He's saving up the gas for it. The other concern, too, is, of course, if he doesn't make good with this attack, if he ends up getting wiped and the army is still very good for Eud, then Krankendau could be at extreme risk of being slapped down by these forces. It looks like Krankendau is going to go ahead and charge forward at some point pretty soon here. Lakizilisks on the extremities getting a little bit of a tickling, but Eud thinks better of trying to commit to that. The captaincy moving forward, I wonder if he's deliberately trying to float that forward. All right, here we go. Some of the spines are going to make some very, very quick work of that top sort of deployment here, but the Zets are all getting reclaimed, so that front line is going to get immediately eviscerated. There is still an autocrat somewhere in this mix, and so it's actually 2 of them, and so it is going to be good to go there. A big loss for all of the Terran bio, but that was a lot of Vespene down the drain, and it doesn't feel like Krankendau really has that much in the way of military right now. So if a counterattack does come in, he is at risk. It's really, now it's a question of does Eud recognize that, or are we going to get into an awkward position where he waits a little bit too long and allows the Zerg to, get back up to a good amount. He has no Tier 2 yet. Oh no, Krankendau still hasn't put down his eye roll. I've just now noticed that. He could have afforded it a while ago. Adding a lot of static defense, you can't reclaim structures, so that might end up helping stymie things a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not liking the position that Krank has found himself in, that's for sure. Moving over here, he sees that the treasury is indeed being deployed to get a little bit of something. At this point, I would just borrow the Lakizilisks. I don't know if you can really use them with your army. I mean, I guess if you get set up, you can use them as sort of like deployables or whatever, but it almost feels like they'd be better served at, canceling out run-bys. It just occurs to me, I don't know if Eud has ever played Zerg. So, yeah, he might just be like, what are these things? I don't even get them. What do they do? How do they work? And you know what? I asked myself the same question. Unfortunately for Crank, the Zeth is not going to be enough to clear that. They both had the same idea. Just put a couple of units around just for the purposes of stopping expansions for free. Definitely a good move. Okay, the Iroll is on the way. It's about halfway done now. I'm still very worried about this movement from coming out from Eud. I feel like Krankendau is teetering at the brink of collapse. And maybe he doesn't know it, or maybe he does, but Eud seemingly does not know it. Love the presence of Sirens. Try to get some good damage spread. I mean, the Zorius are going to intercept a lot of that, but you know, it's just like a good win more type of unit at this point. Some Gorgs coming. 10 Gorgs coming. Okay. I don't hate this idea. Eud has been very lax about scouting, and if we just get a bunch of Gorgs out and we, you know, right-click them off to this side, and, you know, we kill those watchdogs and then go after the mineral harvesters, you know, like that could actually be a pretty good move. Also, there's no defense over here, really, so, and no air defense at the 6 o'clock position. So thinking about it like that, yeah, we could absolutely be in for a world of pain. But it's a question of, do the Gorgs want to engage on a fight? Because that could also work out pretty nicely. We're starting to see some Olympians out with their autoguns. Still plenty of autocrats here as well. This is actually before the cost nerf to them. Again, this is on the release. This is the tourney version, so there's 5 of them right now. Here come the attacks. One of the Gorgs already hitting the deck. A couple more of them coming out as well. Oh no! I think the sustained fire was a little bit too much there, and I think it's a very big swing in favor of Eud. He walks through his own irradiate field with pretty much all of his army. he's helping his opponent out a little bit with that one. Oh, jeez. Oh, golly. All right, well, he ends up saving a couple with the Shaman. But yeah, that was a very big whiff on the Gorg army. This is the kind of army you can't really fight unless you can, like, you can fight from the extremities with some sort of siege, and you can fight by sniping, or, you know, like, I guess if you had Cascathalors, you could, you know, deal with this army pretty well, but that's a tier 3 unit, so, you know, we're not really even using tier 2 units yet. Some Tetzoricors coming out for the sustain. Not a bad idea. Oh, that's a big irradiate, though. 5, Lakizilisks taking some damage. Now, it's not a guaranteed kill. Like, he can just burrow and he'll be okay. Or he doesn't even have to burrow and he'll be okay. But the you definitely don't want to get softened up at this point. Yeah, if he had Pertathalors and he just heckled from the sides, that would definitely be a pretty big move here. But it does feel like he's staring down the barrel of a very loaded gun. Let's just say that. Eud, he's just about ready to pull the trigger on this attack. Even burrowing the Lakizilisk. I'm so proud of him. We've got some Tetzoricors coming still, but that's it, really. There's a lot of Vespene in the bank right now for Krankendau. Finding it difficult to find an engagement. The Sirens softening up his Lakizilisks. All right, here comes the last-ditch effort. He's going to go ahead and burrow, but he's lost most of the Lakizilisks already. He has no more crowd control. The Tetzoricors on the front line doing their best to see if they can cleave through the rest, but it's not going to happen, man. That is a total shellacking, and GG has to be called. Eud finding the time to make it on through. It was his game to drop after being at you know, ahead of base, and of course ahead by a massive mile when it comes to the tech. So even though the reclamation definitely helped him out there, I feel like that's one of those cases where, if you look at it more honestly, he could have ignored the autocrat entirely and just like attacked with, you know, mass Olympians or something, and the same amount of resources invested into that would have yielded him victory as well. So all right, we've got one more game for this set. Let's see what happens. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We have another game here. It's going to be Krankendau in the bottom right of Paradise, Crossbuns, and Eud in the top left. And yes, we do have some very nice colors. I hope you enjoy those colors. I've casted yellow versus yellow on Sideshow before, so this is actually going to be very easy comparatively. But yeah, Krankendau is blood, Eud is red. Love those colors. I'm pretty sure it's blood anyway. Yeah, blood. What a color name. So this is going to be our last game of the video. Hope you are enjoying it. I've kind of slowed down the recording processes for these because they end up taking longer to make since I'm recording more of them. So for example, on a day like today, where normally if I put in an hour towards recording castovers, I would have 2 to 3 videos done. And now it's like that's one video, or, you know, a video and a half or something. So it definitely makes them a little bit more time-consuming to make, which you would expect based on the fact that they're longer. But it seems like people are enjoying the longer ones, so we'll stick to this for now, assuming scheduling allows. It does mean that by necessity, the scheduling is a little bit more fragile. Like, if I only make one video per day, then if something actually happens on a day, then the streak is endangered, and maybe I'd have to make it in the morning of the next day or something, which has happened a few times. But you know, getting one video out a day is still a nice little benefit there. So we have, once again, the Larvosc into pool for Krankendau. It is bio opener, but no stockade yet, or no quarry yet. I suppose Eud is scaling up after this Mason. He'll probably make it. There it is. And yeah, as of right now, we have a couple of odds and ends to talk about here, which is, of course, the bio opener. The fact that it was bio last game looked pretty good. Krankendau definitely could have been more competitive on the tech scaling side. And I feel like the biggest problem that I'm seeing out of both of those games is related to the contain. Krankendau gets behind in a base, gets behind in tempo, etc., etc. So the stimmed Mavericks come out here and maybe posture as if they are moving forward, which is pretty interesting. Might put Krankendau on the defensive more than he needs to. He's going to make 2 pairs of Quasi, and then he's going to consider his next option. It looks like a 3rd pair of Quasi. Classic move. And yeah, I'm pretty interested in what the result is going to be. Obviously, Eud moving forward with the Mason Scout. That could be threatening in and of itself, since if the Mavericks were on their way, it could just make a anchor or something, right? But it gets sniped out, so no such luck for Eud, and not that he was really interested in doing it anyway, so that's fine. Can he go for the clean sweep, or will Krankendau post one on the board before the end of this video? That's the question I want answered. And I'm sure we'll get our damn answer too. One of the things that I'm really excited about for the future of Cosmonarchy is, and the future of our work in general at the No Frauds Club, is just seeing what people do creatively with some of these things. We're going to enter into this echelon where we're going to be talking about, you know, team games and, you know, more 2v2s being cast, more 3v3s being played. Every Saturday, when there's no tournament running, for the last couple of weeks we haven't had any tournaments, we do a more casual game night, which includes FFAs and the likes, team games, of course. And I want to say the other thing that we can end up doing fairly frequently is we can end up going through and talking a little bit about the like some of those UMS maps, right? Because there's been a lot of those. I was actually telling Shambler, who asked me, would you cast a game on like Evolves by 3Crow, which has been being played a lot recently? And I was like, listen, if the replay works and it's, you know, interesting to look at, absolutely, I'll cast that. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. But I feel like that's pretty neat. I feel like that's a cool idea. It's going to be a Covenant before the Vestry this time around, so Eud changing some stuff up. Very interesting. Hatch coming. So this is, I think, the first time it feels like that Krankendau is expanding before his opponent by a considerable margin here. I think maybe it was narrowly in his favor in the previous game. And I know that he did get the base started before Eud got the mech contain up. But usually the economic advantage was, you know, had been with none other than the Terran player himself. Fast Zork is as well. Yeah, something is accelerated about what Krankendau is doing in this game, it feels like. Eidolon already out, so that's the accelerant here for Eud, who is going to go ahead and make a Ministry. Not on location, interestingly enough. Terran buildings move a little bit faster in Cosmonarchy compared to StarCraft 1, so that kind of makes sense. But yeah, it's interesting to think about what some of the moves are going to end up being in the future. And so, you know, especially if we factor in the idea of like team games, that's one of the things I keep thinking about it now is like, dude, we've added so many mechanics. Now the Zeta Core is over here spying on some stuff. We should see some movement. Although, yeah, Krankendau looks over just now. It's like, okay, my spy has once again worked out. So he's going to go ahead and he had already made these Kagrants. I wonder if he was thinking about making an Ovaleth or something to move them a little bit further forward, but he definitely won't be able to do that now. And this is a more containable position than it was before, so that's a little bit concerning, adding some more Kagrants down to the left. In this case, I don't think Eud has bustability anymore. Like, in the last game, he definitely could have just attacked in and did some pretty critical damage, depending on how the micro was. In this game, he's taking a little bit, well, Krankendau's a bit faster with it, but he's also taking his sweet time a little bit more, I feel like. I don't know, Eud is also attacking faster this time too, so it's just like, it's a little interesting in that respect. Cyprian's here for enforcement. Huracan stopping any Zeth action from happening. But yeah, the star pad is finished, but no Anseal, right? And so the Lycisilisks will force this back. Would have loved to see a dedicated snipe onto one of those Cyprians. That would have made the Quaz units a little bit more powerful. But yeah, since we have the faster Zorkas, I think Krankendau kind of read the situation and says, okay, maybe he agrees with what I was saying, that the biggest threat to him right now is the lack of being able to take a third base, the containment, the economic advantage that Eud gets, and then he turns that into a tech advantage, and he turns that into a military advantage. And so it absolutely seems like it's a big thing. Adding another Larvosk now. In fact, I think he's going to go up to like 3 Larvosk 2 hatch, is what it looks like to me. Third hatch, rather, in the main, so that's something fine. That's just moving out to confirm that the Eidolons are here. There is no... Okay, the Anseal's coming now, so there's like a 20-second timer now on when these Lycisilisks will need to be moved, and by then, there's not really that many military, right? Krankendau has kind of gone back into just macro. I think he might have intuited that this attack came sooner, so there's not any expansion. Or the expansion was also delayed or whatever. But yeah, you can see here that the Lycisilisk is... it's going to get sniped, actually. So that's a little rough, right? But now at this point, right, like, where do you go from here? Because if you step too far forward, there's still no Ava left to detect these, by the way, which is a little daring. That's one thing that I think would definitely help Crank. And, if he just wants to move a little bit further forward, he's going to go ahead and try to go for it. But you can see, when you see the unburrowed Lycisilisks, right, that's a signal for Eud to step forward. Bit of a misrally on the Zeths there as well. So these are some tight situations to be in, but okay, Krankendau's going to attempt the bust. He charges forward with 5 Lycisilisks and gets a good burrow set up. The Zeths are still alive for now. Just getting a single Eidolon dead and a single Huracan so far. That's a nice focus onto that one. It looks like some of these units are right-clicked onto each other. Yeah, they're on a move command instead of actually attacking. That's a huge blunder from Eud, and that is going to be exactly what Krankendau needed. He could have even popped the Anseal if he focus fired it enough. Even with that blunder, it was still relatively close. I feel like Eud would have won that handily if his units weren't, on a follow order. So very, very unfortunate misclick for him. But now he's on the defensive, setting up an anchor. I don't know that Krankendau can really attack forward. He only has the 2 Lycisilisks. But you can see what this means to him. Immediately sending out workers to expand to the 3rd and I assume also the 4th. Or no, I guess... Oh, he's just doing double hatch. Okay. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Again, this is a difficult base to hold on this version of the map. Oh no, his Zeth is revealed by the fire. That's all right. No worries. That was just an illusion, Huracans leave behind fire effect fields that if you walk through, you take fire damage. And that's what that was. All right, so what is the game state now, right? We've got more star pads being made. The Atlas is going down on 2 base. So Eud's still taking the tech advantage. More Lycisilisks being made. The Hydrith Den now up. So we might see some Iziricors. I'm actually not sure what the Hydrith Den is for. I guess it must be for Iziricors, yeah? Trying to use the splash damage from there. Well, it's like multi-target, right? It's the bounce stuff, Crushing Tide. They attack 2 targets, and each attack bounces once. So that ends up being pretty useful. So maybe that's what it's for. A little bit of a mineral sink to still give him a little bit of crowd control while he scales up his gas income. Should definitely get those workers on the gas, speaking of. Leverage his extra gas income availability. The treasury is being put down at the natural, or the 3rd base rather, for Eud on location. So feels pretty confident about being able to hold. His army is on his side of the map after all. I have to praise Krankendau's ability to look around the map and see what's going on. Definitely get a lot of vision with the Zeth patrols and stuff. He'll even spot this army out as it comes on in, so I think that's a really big deal, actually. And so, yeah, he'll absolutely be aware of what's happening right now. And so he tries to wrangle his situation there. By the way, if you guys wonder about the colors, I forgot to mention it when I was talking about the colors being similar. There's a bug right now where if one of your players prefers colors and the other one doesn't, or even if... it's like the color preferences don't get correctly parsed in the replay, but they do in the game. So in the game, I guarantee you, like, Eud was a different color, or Krankendau was a different color. But in the replay, they'll be like their preferred colors, even if there's a collision there. So there's something that is not being done properly on replay in it that is related to that. So Iral Iris now going down for Krankendau. He is going to scale up the tech tree. Again, this is like as the Atlas finishes over here, and we see Mantle and Starpart being added. So, Reservoirs, good for the gas cap, definitely going to be good for the scaling. And yeah, we do see a bunch of Izira cores. There's a couple of Hydras as well, but you can't really use them for bio attacks, I feel like. Maybe they're good for busting down the ant seals. That might be the thought process. But there's not so many of them either, so... Could have also just been like a misbuy where he made one by accident. Does he want to attack before his tier 2 timing? I mean, he can attack before his opponent can get tier 2 units up, so it is still very much a valid situation. And trading down your army is something that does end up benefiting the Zerg, because they can just remax. You can see 24 Hydras just got made, and now he's going to charge on forward. So where are those Lakizilisks? One of them burrows in the back, a little bit ineffective. They're going to try to charge forward again, but where's the crowd control? It's not really out there. Not very many healing, though, so all of this damage that is coming out of Krankendau is mostly working wonders. 3 Lakizilisks still up, not being focused down. I think the bio might have fallen at the worst possible time, because I was thinking that Krankendau would lose most of his army in this attack, and it would just be an army wipe that would favor the Zerg narrowly. But in this case, he actually won it handily, and the Lakizilisks even dealing splash damage onto these Masons. That's going to drop the worker count pretty spectacularly, and now we're down to even workers on one less base for the Terran player. He tries to evacuate his treasury. Not sure it's going to end up happening. It looks like Krankendau's not being the most studious about it. He's going back home, making the lake, making the Tethith swamp, and yeah, just wow. What a match. He found the right timing there. That's a good-ass engagement. Talk about blood color. He turns your units into blood, funnily enough. All right, coming back in for another attack. This is going to be very different, though. The Seraph is out. The Apostle is out. I feel like there's enough for Eud to hold from this position. So this might be a situation where Krankendau wants to fall on back a little bit. The double Savant coming out of the anchor. They are just absolutely powering through this force. And so, yeah, absolutely a case where Krankendau is just going to fall back, cut his losses. He has the tech, not necessarily advantage, but parity. He didn't snipe the treasury, which is a little bit unfortunate, because that means that workers can transfer over there and get off this oversaturated base. But despite that, we're still looking pretty good overall, I would say. I heard the form switch come out for some of the savants there, so always interested in what people are using. Eventually, the graphic will actually visually show you what mode it's in. So, I do think mixing there's like one entropy gauntlets and the other 3 are a power siphon. I think mixing that ends up being pretty useful. Although versus Zerg, I think the entropy gauntlets, which deal the penetrating shot, is a little bit better than maybe people give it credit for. But also, you can the attack speed bonus that you get from power siphon does transfer when you switch modes. So there is that element of like, I'm going to get to a really high attack speed and then transfer to penetrating and just absolutely annihilate your army. If you have the positioning for that down pat, then you can absolutely do that. A bunch of Lyrilisks being made. I don't know that they'll be as efficient versus this composition, but they might be good for stepping forward to snipe down the Apostles. 2 of them are already on the field. Definitely a situation where Eud is looking for some glory. He's got an anvil coming at the 3rd base, so that's interesting. Setting up his 4th, which is already up and running for our Zerg player. Again, you can see the map is just a flood with a bunch of different little Zeth scouts here and there. So he might know that this base is here. Obviously, he did have his Zeth scout die, but he's going to go for the attack. The Lyrilisks is focusing down a couple of individual units here. The Ant Seals are going to fall, but that clump is now taking damage from the Seraph. Where are the focus firings onto the Apostle? The Apostles are all in the back, and they are being completely untouched. But the Tetzora cores are mostly staying alive right now. That's thanks to their sustain. I think he might be able to power on through, despite not focusing down the main enemy force that you got to watch out for. And no, he is not able to. Those Apostles stay alive the whole time through. But not that many Zerg units actually got transferred over, right? A lot of the Hydras, a lot of the Zeths or whatever, sure. But that's not going to be the most impactful of targets. It's not like you were able to steal Lyrilisks, or you were able to steal, you actually, I don't think you can steal units that mutate. You can't steal like units that you make directly from another unit. So in this case, the fact that Krankendau is making the Quasi and then turning them into Lyrilisks means the only thing he's going to give up to his opponent, reclamation-wise, is the Quasilisk, right? Because it's going to turn back into the Quasi before it becomes reclaimed. And that's actually pretty interesting, I think. That's pretty neat. All right, 5th base is up for Krankendau. He doesn't have anything mining it just yet. And Eud fancies a move out. He's starting to saturate his 12 o'clock position. He is just about done with his Morning Star, so we'll have to see where he wants to nuke. He can do it with the Eidolons, and he can do it with the Seraph. I don't see any Eidolons with this force anymore, so I think it'll be the Seraph. We got to watch out for where this bad boy goes, and if it doesn't just get focused down, the Lyrilisks can and will do that, if given the opportunity. But definitely using these mutated units for Zerg is a pretty big move there, I think. Definitely works out. The slow Zeth saying hi. All right, a bit of an attempt here on the engage. Tetzoricors in a small enough count. I think they can be and will be managed. The Lyrilisks all balling up. There is no real heavy static defense or crowd control from this army, but the Seraph Irradiate is doing so much, and no, Krankendau cannot post the dub. I'm looking at the money in the bank, and I'm wondering what he was thinking about building from that point. It does feel like Eud could have been held at an arm's length there, but the engagements, the Azazel defensive matrix at the end, of course on the Stolen Hydra, because why not, for extra points, and the fact that he had all those Harakans there to hold the Tetzoricors back, that was a really big deal. The Lyrilisks also sticking together made it easy targets for the Seraph Irradiate, so there's a lot going on in these fights, and you know that you don't play against a lot of Terrans. There's a lot of reasons why Terrans might end up having some heavy success, and obviously since these games were played, the reclamation mechanic was also adjusted pretty significantly. So there's always like more to learn as a result of all of those changes. But I think we're getting closer to a factor that seems pretty healthy. If you want more thoughts on the reclamation adjustments that still might need to be made, you can check out the series that I cast or the game that I cast previously. Arbuz versus Hamster, which just had a ridiculous ending. I had no way to predict that one. But besides that, I hope you guys have enjoyed this set. We'll be back tomorrow with more Cosmonarchy, so I'll see you guys then. GG.